It's a cold outside, should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to next installment of Ask Alan. This time we're Ask Alan and Bruce McMullen. Bruce is my guest today, and he and I both served in the Strickland administration, and he's a great lawyer here in town in Memphis, and a good friend of mine, and he's been nice enough to come in and talk with us, and hopefully we'll have a nice session to get to know Bruce and hear a little bit of inside baseball on what it's like to be the city attorney for Memphis, Tennessee. Bruce, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Alan. Thanks for having me. Great to be here, and I look forward to talking to your audience.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Now, Bruce, you've been a lawyer here in Memphis for your professional career, but you didn't start out in Memphis, did you?
No, I didn't, Alan. Actually, I'm from Middle Georgia, down in a little small town near Macon, Georgia, called Sparta, Georgia. And I went to the University of Georgia, and I started my professional career in Macon working for a Warren Buffett company that has a little gecko that advertises for it every day. And that's where I first started my career, and I got exposed to claims handling and how insurance companies work. And I'm evaluating liability. And interestingly, I got a chance to meet Warren Buffett before he was a rock star. Everybody thought at the time I met him, he was related to Jimmy Buffett some kind of way. But that's where I started. And after working in corporate America for about 5 years, I went to law school at the University of Tennessee, which was really weird. Because going to the University of Georgia undergrad, you were conditioned to hate the University of Tennessee. But then I found myself there in law school, and it was a great place. I enjoyed it.
What was the University of Georgia like as an undergraduate?
Oh, it was great. It was the difference between, and I kind of compare it to the University of Tennessee. The University of Georgia is not landlocked. So it's a big sprawling campus with a full-time bus system, and the environment was great. It was a college town. You saw a lot of great bands. During my time, REM, bands like that kind of evolved from there. And it was a great time to be a young college student in Athens, Georgia when I went. And it was a great town. In Tennessee, going to law school there is a little different because I was more mature, did less of the social life. But it was I happened to be there during the Peyton Manning years. So how lucky can you get?
Well, speaking of Peyton Manning and University of Georgia, did you by any chance see the golf challenge that he played with Tiger Woods?
I absolutely did, Alan. And interestingly, I never watched golf on television, okay, unless maybe Tiger was about to win the Masters back in the day. But I watched this, and it was hilarious. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, Tom Brady was frustrated as he could be, but he made the shot of the century that kind of gave him his mojo back. The whole thing was a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
Did you hear what Manning said about coordinating his outfit with Tiger Woods?
No.
Well, Tiger famously wears the red shirt and the black pants on Sundays, and so that's what he was going to wear. And evidently, either he or his people asked Peyton if he would dress like Tiger, and Peyton said no. He didn't want to give the University of Georgia any recruiting shots to show him in a red and a black outfit.
Oh wow! That's interesting. Rivalries don't die easily. You realize that?
No, they don't. Not especially in the SEC.
But I cheered for Peyton at least 8 or 9 games a year. One game I could not cheer for him.
I understand. I understand. And in particular, one game in Memphis, cheering for Peyton Manning didn't help at all.
Absolutely. You're talking about that game that Memphis beat the University of Tennessee. It is really funny. I was there with some faculty from the University of Tennessee, and it was real cold. And I told my wife, I said, well, as soon as Tennessee takes the lead, we can leave because then Memphis is going to fold. And we left early and went to a TGI Friday. And then the fans started coming in later. So suffice it to say, I didn't actually see the victory. I watched 3/4 of the game and left, and they came in. And I thought a guy was joking when he said Memphis won. I mean, it was incredible. That was an incredible victory for the city.
Well, as a Memphis fan, becoming a tradition on the show, I always quote my father, Jim Crone, and he always said when I was growing up, we will beat Tennessee when nobody expects it, including us. And that's exactly what happened. Nobody expected us to win. No Memphis fans went to the game expecting a victory. We're just hoping to kind of hold your own against Peyton Manning. And to have that outcome was great for that program and great for the city.
Oh, and Memphis program has built so much until they got a rich program problems. Nobody will play them outside of the conference. Nobody want to play them. They're too competitive. None of the other big Power 5 schools is no benefit of playing Memphis. You could only lose. That would be the worst thing. So that's
right.
Big program problems. That's good for Memphis.
Well, you mentioned working for the Warren Buffett companies. What was it like back in those days to work for a guy like that?
What's interesting, at the time, Geico was a small telephone insurance company. So you called in and got your insurance policy, and the Cadillac of the industry were the larger companies that had bricks and mortar. You went and knew your insurance agency. And so the thought was very few people buy something as personal as insurance over the phone. Well, you know what happened over time, the internet became more and more prevalent, and you had a generation that'll do anything online without ever meeting anybody. And that was kind of the explosion right before I left the company of Geico becoming a real major factor, because they were already set up to do telephone sales. So they turned it into internet sales, and they had no real offices, not a lot of brick and mortar around the country. So that was an expense that was saved. And they took advantage of that, and that just really grew the company exponentially. And when I thought it got to its peak, I kind of cashed out and went to law school. So that's what I did. And then after finishing UT, my first job was at Lewis Thomason here in Memphis, Tennessee.
And of course, that firm does a lot of insurance defense work. And I would imagine that your experience at Geico really helped prepare you for that.
It did. I knew the lingo, I knew the industry, and quite frankly, I still had friends who were claims managers. So it gave me a good opportunity to reach out to some people and kind of develop some business. And also, Lewis Thomason did a fair amount of medical malpractice, and I did a lot of that. So that's kind of how I started and got my expertise kind of going, was in insurance defense and medical malpractice.
Now, I think one thing that a lot of people don't know about you is that in high school you were an accomplished basketball player.
I was an accomplished high school basketball player. No further than that. We just put a period right there. Had no future at the next level, but I had a lot of fun. My son and I have been watching The Last Dance. I was on the high school team with Horace and Harvey Grant, and we had a pretty impressive high school team. And I always thought I was better than both, but now I guess time has proven that wasn't true. But tell me that at 17 and 18, and I would argue you down. But I had a lot of fun with that. We have a lot of fond memories, and it was good for me and my son to kind of watch The Last Dance, even though everything about Horace wasn't positive on there. It was good to see a high school teammate and a friend and kind of relive in some way his pro career.
Well, I heard he can't take a deposition to save his life.
There we go. I say, I did not want to spend my life, chasing the $1 million in sports, and so I kind of focused on academics. And I'm happy with where I am, and I bet you he's happy with where he is.
I would imagine so. Now, your son and my son played high school basketball together. They overlapped, I guess, a year out at Christian Brothers. How's Reese and the brothers going to do this year?
I think they are poised to do well if the COVID virus subsides. One thing from your son Charlie playing there, the true sixth man of CBHS team is that crowd. That crowd packed in the building like sardines, and I'm very fearful that they may play but may not have the audiences that they're used to. But the team is poised to do well, and they had their first day of summer practice today, which entailed running on a football field, clearly distancing from each other, and no basketball involved. So that's what practice was like this morning at 7 o'clock for.
Yeah, I remember when Charlie played those summer workouts, and it always paid off late in the season because those guys were really well conditioned as a result of all that running they did during the summer.
Yeah, and one thing the coaches do well over there, they work out contrary to what a lot of endurance and strength trainers recommend. They work out during the season. And so the idea is that they won't tire out and they continue to build their body during the season. So hopefully there will be a season, and my son is very excited. It'll be his last year. So we're excited about that.
Well, you make a great point about the crowd, and they've been talking about expanding that facility, but as you say, one of the great things about it, playing particularly when they play a big rivalry game like Briarcrest or MUS, or even to some extent in recent years, St. Benedict, you can't get in the place, and the other side would always complain because you couldn't get in the gym, and it would be packed with Christian Brothers students, and a very hostile place to play.
It is, and I think actually early on my son was looking forward to a new gym being built, but I think after he played in there, he fell in love with what he calls the coffin. And he and I were in North Carolina, and we went by Cameron Indoor Stadium, and I couldn't believe how small. I knew it was small, but I'd never been in there. I couldn't believe how small it was. It must be incredible to get a ticket to those small venues, but it creates such an atmosphere that is just really great. I have a question for you, Alan. How happy are you to be like me, retired from the city and not dealing with some of the problems that are going on right now?
I've always said that there's no position in government or politics that isn't improved by adding the word former to it. And to answer your question directly, it breaks my heart to see some of the things that are going on. Particularly, I've been proud in Memphis. I think we've generally had good protests, and I'm hopeful that outside influences and bad influences won't undermine the progress that folks are making who are actually protesting and trying to better the situation. And on one level, I'm glad that responsibility isn't falling on my shoulders. On the other hand, you kind of miss it a little bit because I want to be there making a difference. But I'm just so proud of Mike Rollins and Mayor Strickland and Mayor Harris and Sheriff Bonner and everyone who's approached this from a law enforcement standpoint. And for those people who think we haven't made progress, I was reflecting on this today. The number of public officials who are approaching this from a place of positivity versus in the 60s where every public official was approaching it from negativity. And, how can they quash it? How can they, marginalize the protest? Is really, really remarkable that, that sheriff, I think in Michigan, who got off the line and walked with people, Mike Rollins, who's famously known to going on the bridge several years ago and diffusing that situation, and the mayor of Chicago and Atlanta, and just on and on and on, all of these leaders who come out and supported the cause, but also encouraged public safety. And, I think that's a positive that we can all take away from this, is that in the establishment, there are many more friendly voices and supportive voices than there were 50 years ago. And that certainly is progress that we've all made.
I agree with you. And just having been in the pressure cooker like you, I got a real appreciation for what I know is going on 24/7 with that leadership team. And I don't want to leave out my successor, Jennifer Sink, who is now the chief legal officer. And last time I spoke with her, she hadn't had much sleep in a while. So they're really working it. It makes me reflect on a conversation I had with Director Rollins. You and I were there with the bridge incident, and we went through various things at that time. We kind of joked, there's never a headline in the paper, no disaster occurred, everything was averted. And we would, as you know, we spent a lot of time anticipating things, working hard. And then when we are successful and nothing happens, nobody hears about it, but they have no idea how hard the leadership worked to avoid that. But I'm like you. I'm proud of how Memphis has done so far. No administration is perfect. You're going to have some snafus because the administration is built of people and they're not perfect. But I'm really proud of our time there, Alan, and I'm really proud of what the mayor and his crew has done thus far with handling these issues. I look around at other cities and I see some of the mistakes they make in handling it, and like you say, the lack of sensitivity and us versus them instead of a we mentality just have really put them in a pickle in a lot of instances. But I miss it, but I'm not envious of the people who are there now facing it.
No, it's a challenging thing, and people, and I say this all the time. When I, as you know, and some of our listeners know, I was briefly on the city council, and people would always ask me, what's your biggest surprise? What were you most surprised about? And I would always say, I don't know that I was surprised by this, but I'm always impressed by the commitment that public officials in Memphis have. And, there's lots of cynicism out there about politicians and public officials being self-serving and whatnot. And I can only speak for Memphis and Shelby County governments. There are lots of good people out there who come to work every day, from the mayor on down to the lowest paid employee. And all they want to do is do a good job for the people of this city and county. And it shows in times like this that our folks do care. And I was proud to be a part of, not just be a part of the Strickland administration, but I was proud to say that I work for Memphis city government.
No, I get the same feeling. I had very little involvement in working for government other than doing legal stuff, but actually being in the strategy room before I took the appointment from Mayor Strickland. And it was eye-opening, and it was very, very rewarding. I had no idea how rewarding it would be. And it's something I told Mayor Strickland, this may have been the best professional 4 years of my life, as far as professional, but it was a great experience. But hey, I don't miss it. I'm happy to be former right now. I can smile and opine on things that happen, but don't have to be accountable.
Well, you talk about professional accomplishments, and certainly you had a lot of professional accomplishments when you were city attorney or chief legal officer, as Mayor Strickland has renamed that position. But one of them had to be the legal fight related to the Confederate statues in Memphis.
Yeah, that was a really big one. That we fought hard on that, and we fought at every level, from the Chancery Court to the Appellate Court to the Supreme Court. And it was one of those things that, by and large, no city is 100% anything, but by and large, 90% of Memphis was behind us. We had a strategy. We executed that strategy, and we were very successful. That will go down in my life as one of my things that I'm most proud of being involved in. Probably other than the birth of my kids, and I don't know how much involvement I had with that, but it's interesting you should bring that up. I got a call from Birmingham. They had an interesting situation where their statues were taken down by protesters, and they, similarly to us, had a state law that governs how they would have the statues removed, and their law was built in with a lot of heavy fines. And as you know, they covered them up at one point, and they were fines like something like $25,000 a day or something like that. So their legal issue now is they've been taken down not by the government but by protesters, and now the legal issue, what obligation do they have put them back up, or how they have to deal with it. And anytime you're dealing with something like that, either the taking down the statues, the pandemic, or protests, is not a whole lot of roadmaps to go by. You just have to, you're presented with the issue and have to think those things through. So it is, that too is something that has been challenging, but I was very, very proud to be a part of that. I was proud to have a boss at that time, Mayor Strickland, who really, he put faith in us, and never second guess, never questioned. And sometimes that make it even more stressful for you when your boss don't second guess you, because you say, well, I can't let him down. But that was something that you felt like benefited the whole city and would benefit future generations. And it was great. I appreciate you bringing that up. That was a great accomplishment, and I was happy to be a part of it.
I was driving in to the office this morning, like you. My law office is downtown, and I'm driving down Union Avenue, and I passed Health Science Park, where that statue of General Forrest used to stand, and it made me wonder, and I'd be interested in your perspective on this. How important is it, as we sit here right now with all that's going on, that statue and the statue of Jefferson Davis are gone, and not just gone, but gone at the behest of city government?
It is very important. I got to tell you a story, Alan. When I first moved to Memphis, I drove past that statue and never paid it any attention. I have a friend who parents immigrated to this country, and they didn't know much about the history of the country. And they got photographs. They took photographs in front of a lot of statues because they thought, obviously, there's some famous American. I'll just take a picture. I really don't know the history of it. And I was somewhat, I just never paid it any attention until my kids were born. And we would drive by there and saw I think some groups there that were there celebrating. And I kind of taught them what was going on. And then it became something that I really thought about every time I drove by it. But having it gone, to answer your question, Alan, I think is very good. I think the protests would be a little more incendiary if they were still there, quite frankly. And I think Birmingham proved that to be true. That's one of the flashpoints in Birmingham right now, even with this protest. So there are a lot of benefits of having it gone, some immediate benefits. That's not something that's left there to continue to divide this city. Historically, I can't wait till the pedestals are removed so they can do something pretty in that area. But historically, that's something that is very meaningful, very meaningful. And I think about it. It's not a time I don't drive by there and just stare at it. But absolutely, Alan. It means a lot to me, and I think overall the dividends that this community will reap by not having to deal with that, I think, will be enormous over time.
Well, and one aspect of it that I think is particularly important is Memphis will be probably the first, if not only, city to take a statue like that down, but then the statue be re-erected someplace else that's more appropriate. And there are two sides. I had a judge once tell me that every pancake, no matter how thin it is, it's got two sides. And so there's always two sides to this. But I think the fact that the plan is down the road to perhaps re-erect that statue in a more appropriate place that can be in a historical context is also a testament to the way the way it was taken down, not in an appeasement frame, but in a more productive frame, particularly as it related to the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination, to not having those statues standing during that. Again, goes back to what you were saying. Nothing bad happened, so nobody really thinks about it, but those could have really marred that celebration, or not really a celebration, but the remembrance of Dr. King's legacy. To get distracted by the statue, I think would have been terrible for Memphis, and I think one of the reasons why we're not looking at some of the problems that we've had in other cities right now.
You're exactly right. I will give a shout out to lawyers, Alan. There are a lot of lawyer jokes out there, but it's lawyers that have really set the foundation for a lot of change in America. You can go back to Brown v. Board of Education or a lot of the similar cases. And you're right. We did it right. We did it in accordance with the law. We argued our case all the way to the Supreme Court. And I think, and I know there are two sides, and I know there's another side that did not want those statutes removed. But when I talked to them, the way it was done made it more palatable. And then the other part is, as you say, I was never in favor of destruction of any part of history. But I think it should be put in the proper context or put somewhere where it can be preserved, and that people who are interested in that should be allowed to see it. And once we won at the Supreme Court, we got a great amount of cooperation from the other side to now let's get this thing in a place where it can be preserved and can be enjoyed. So I know everybody won't shake hands and say, oh, we're all happy. But if you're going to resolve an issue that at some point one side is going to win, one side is going to lose, I think both sides appreciate the fact that it was fought through the courts, fairly, open, and legally it was done. And that's one thing I'm also proud that we did it that way.
Well, and one thing I learned that was a real education to me as a lifelong Memphian. My family's been in Memphis since the 1850s. And as you say, to pass that statute as I was growing up, I really didn't think anything about it because it really didn't mean anything to me. And I know that there are white Memphians and Tennesseans that it means something to them from an historical standpoint. But as I got into the debate in public about it and talked to African American friends of mine and just African American constituents and people I'd never met before in my life, but to hear their side of the story and to hear what it meant to them, no matter what the intent of the people were who erected it, it didn't just offend people. It intimidated and cowed them and sent them a signal that they didn't belong in Memphis or weren't wanted in Memphis. And once I understood the other side of it, that just relocating it, if that made one more person feel like a part of Memphis, that Memphis cared about them. The mayor told a story about an older man who watched it with, I think, somebody on our staff and who was a relative, and she said this man was a big, strong baby boomer, maybe a little older man. She said, I'd never seen him give any emotion, but he sobbed as he watched that. And she said, what's moving you so much about this? And the answer really surprised her, and it surprised me. It wasn't all vindication, we got them, retribution. It was somebody finally cared what we think. And to give that impression to the majority of the city that the city government cares what they think, that the private sector, the philanthropists who invested in the green space, that they cared what they think. I think it helps us turn a very important corner in Memphis, and that's something that's not going to make the headlines. It's not something anybody's going to get reelected by, but hopefully that will pay dividends down the road in terms of reconciliation and making this one Memphis and not two or three different Memphises.
I agree. And I think we're seeing some of the dividends now while we have the protests out there. As I said before, I think it would be worse and more incendiary if that was there. And that's a dividend that we don't get a banner in the paper. You know what? This would be worse if not for. But I think we're reaping some of the benefits and dividends from that now. I really do.
Well, Bruce, to change the subject a little bit, you're not city attorney anymore. What are you doing? What are you doing now?
Well, as you know, I'm a shareholder at Baker Donaldson, and I am back in the world of commercial litigation, and I represent the city on some matters. I represent several other clients, and so I'm back in practice. And I can tell you, Alan, practicing law at a big law firm, I love it. It's a lot of fun, but it does not even compare at all to our 4 years there with the city. It does not compare.
Do you think you're a different lawyer now than you were 5 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. I have more of appreciation for the client aspect of it, and I have more appreciation for your client. A lot of times, whether you represent a corporation or a government, they're dealing with unarticulated issues that you may not know anything about. And when you get direction from your client, it's very important to engage them, because there are a lot of other factors that are non-legal that drive some of their decisions and some of their actions. So I think being the chief legal officer and having to manage litigation has given me a real appreciation for the client aspect of it. And, we as lawyers, we think when we write a good report, it needs to be 45 pages long because we're showing the client. We really spent a lot of time and studied it. I learned, and in that job, we had to make decisions very quickly, and we had to be a quick study, and we didn't have time to read a treatise on something before we made a decision. And so that has helped me with my clients. I have a strong summary statement ahead of any update or status, a paragraph long, everything you really need to know, and then if you want to dig into the details. So just simple things like that have given me a different perspective, and it has helped. It helped grow me as a person, and it helped grow me as a lawyer and a practitioner, servicing my client, solving problems. And that's what we do as lawyers. We solve problems. And
that's what good lawyers do. Good lawyers solve problems, and I think mediocre lawyers bill time. And
there you go.
I've always said I'd rather solve your problem than win your lawsuit, because particularly for business clients, that's really what they want, is the problem solved. And most clients wouldn't know a great lawyer and if it fell on them. And just like I wouldn't know great plumbing if it fell on me. You just expect it to be done well. But it's being practical. And I think you're right. I think that's one thing being in a position like that teaches you, is how to be practical.
Right. Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. We talked about your legal career as a city attorney, but outside of that, what was one of your favorite cases, or one of your accomplishments that you really are proud of from the years that you've been practicing law?
Oh, it's funny. That's a tough question for me, because I represent hospitals and doctors in medical malpractice cases, and some of them get a victory in one of those is not always pretty. But some of the just from a legal challenging. I represented a large grocery, and I won't tell you the name, but they have a card that you swipe every time you go to buy groceries, so they keep up with what you buy. And it was a class action over in another state, challenging the card based on an antiquated law that you can't price discriminate with customers. So a customer having this car has a cheaper price than that car. That was the genesis of the class action. Mm-hmm. And it was a case that it went from the district court to the federal court of appeals, back down, and then was kicked back to the state courts, and ended up with a ruling in the Arkansas Supreme Court. So from a civil procedure standpoint, that was a very, very complex case when you talk legally about it. It was a very, very complex case, but probably one of the more rewarding cases when I was a young lawyer, someone that worked at my firm was having trouble with a relative on disability and trying to get certain benefits. And that's not the type of law I practice, but I took it as a pro bono. And I was shocked how much money and benefits I got for him. And the employee, it was for her mother. Every time she saw me from years later, she thought, I was a godsend to her family. And that probably was the most rewarding case you can do, and I was happy I could fumble my way through it, because that's not what I did. But I was even shocked that I was successful. I said, wow. But that was probably one of the most rewarding cases I've done for that family. Later on, when her mom passed, I went to the funeral. And I didn't know any of her siblings, but boy, they ran and hugged me like I was. And she pointed out, and she said, "And you remember?" And they were, and that was very rewarding.
Yeah, sometimes it's just even the result is great, but sometimes it's just wonderful for the client to know that the lawyer believes in them.
Absolutely.
And that's true whether you're representing a woman who's looking to get disability or a big corporation. You're still dealing with people. You're still dealing with decision makers who have a stake in whatever the legal issue is. And I think really great lawyers are the ones that let their clients know that they believe in them, they care about them, they're not just another file. And that really is when it's rewarding for the lawyer, is you can make that connection on a personal level.
Absolutely.
Well, Bruce, I've really enjoyed our time. I appreciate your time and coming on and sharing your past and some of your accomplishments and stories with me on this format. And so I'm going to let you go, let you get back to practicing law, and I'm going to do the same thing. And I appreciate everybody watching. And please join us the next time on Ask Alan. And in the meantime, I'm going to go out and get a little justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.